All right, so today we're going to jump into the work of the psychoanalyst Erich Fromm. We're looking at his really powerful framework for understanding what happens when a personality, well, when it starts to break down.
Fromm believed that a healthy life really just boils down to three basic things: the ability to love, the ability to work, and the ability to think productively. Simple enough, right? But that raises a huge question. What happens when someone is fundamentally unable to do those things? What does that kind of personality even look like?
From Fromm, the answer was both simple and incredibly profound. He argued that people who are psychologically disturbed have failed to create a genuine, real union with other people. It's this inability to connect, this failure of what he called productive love, that's the root cause. It's the soil from which all other severe issues start to grow.
Okay, let's get into the first of three pretty severe personality disorders that Fromm identified. And just a quick heads up, when Fromm uses the word necrophilia, he has a very specific and much broader definition in mind than the one we typically think of.
So, just throw that common definition out the window for a minute. For Fromm, necrophilia is a complete character orientation. It's an attraction to everything that isn't alive: death, decay, dirt, destruction. It is the absolute polar opposite of a love for life.
And when you look at these traits all together, they paint a coherent, though, a very disturbing picture. This isn't just someone who's a little aggressive. This is a person who actively hates humanity and loves destruction. Their call for law and order isn't about creating justice, it's about control and punishment. Their entire life, their whole orientation is pointed towards things that are dead or dying.
Fromm saw this as a core conflict. He believed biophilia, the love of life, is our natural state. It's our default setting. Necrophilia is what happens when that natural love gets blocked or stunted. It's a kind of pathological alternative.
The second disorder Fromm gets into is malignant narcissism. And listen, this isn't just about vanity. This is a condition that fundamentally warps a person's perception of reality, and, crucially, the value of everyone else around them.
Look, we all have some narcissistic tendencies, right? A healthy interest in ourselves is normal, but in its malignant form, it becomes this intense distortion. The self is everything, everyone and everything else is basically worthless in comparison.
And what's so striking here are the things that seem to totally contradict each other. I mean, on one hand, you have this distorted belief in your own superiority. But on the other, there's this obsessive focus on your own health and past mistakes, what Fromm actually called moral hypochondriasis. The key is that their sense of worth isn't connected to what they've actually achieved, but to this incredibly fragile self-image.
And that fragility leads to this terrifyingly predictable chain reaction. Any little bit of criticism isn't met with just annoyance, but with pure, intense rage. The first instinct is always to destroy the critic. But if that's not possible, all that rage turns inward, and it causes a complete collapse into deep depression and a feeling of total worthlessness.
Okay, let's get to the third and final disorder, incestuous symbiosis. This one is all about a complete loss of your individual identity through an extreme pathological dependence on another person or, well, on another entity.
So the core idea here is that the person feels completely inseparable from their host. Their personality literally blends with the other person, and their own sense of self, their I, it just disappears. They can't function. They can't even think of themselves as an independent person.
And here, Fromm makes a really crucial break with Freud. He says that this deep fixation isn't actually driven by sex, like in the Oedipus complex. No, he says the fundamental need is for security. The person is so terrified of being alone that they sacrifice their entire identity just to stay attached. Any sexual stuff is just a result of that deeper, more desperate need. This disorder actually starts as a natural attachment in infancy, but it just fails to evolve. It gets stuck. So any threat to that relationship causes crippling anxiety. And what's so important to understand is that the host doesn't have to be a person. It can be a family, a company, a church, or even an entire nation. Ultimately, this dependence is what destroys a person's ability to love authentically and to ever stand on their own 2 feet.
Now, Fromm is really careful to draw a line here. He says a lot of people might have a more common, kind of benign form of mother fixation, needing a partner who cares for them and admires them. But that is very, very different from the pathological symbiosis, where your entire identity is just gone and your life is severely impaired.
So, we have these 3 severe disorders: necrophilia, malignant narcissism, and incestuous symbiosis. Now let's see how Fromm puts them all together into this one big, unified theory of psychological health.
This is it. This is the ultimate expression of the unhealthy personality. When you have a person who's attracted to death, who devalues all other people, and who has no independent self, well, they embody what Fromm calls the syndrome of decay.
So here we can see Fromm's complete vision. On one side, you've got this pull towards decay, and it's driven by those three disorders we just talked about. But notice there's an opposing force, pulling in the complete other direction.
For every pathological pull towards death and decay, Fromm identified a healthy, life-affirming counterpart. And when you put those together, they form the syndrome of growth, the path towards a productive and loving life.
And the contrast is just so stark. The opposite of necrophilia, the attraction to death, is biophilia, the love of life. The antidote to malignant narcissism is a genuine love for others. And the cure for incestuous symbiosis is what Fromm called positive freedom, the ability to be independent while still connecting productively with the world.
Now, it's really important to remember that these syndromes are the extremes. According to Fromm, most of us exist somewhere in the middle, in a state of average development, being pulled to some degree by both of these powerful forces.
And that leaves us with a final and pretty vital question for our own time. In a world that often feels so isolating, full of screens and factions and tribes, which direction are we, as a society and as individuals, leaning? Are we leaning towards the syndrome of decay or towards the syndrome of growth?